Rejis Williams, step away from the appraisal
An
desk.
appraisal is professional judgment, not a confession.
Jury found those valuations help support fraudulent loans.
Markets were moving and every lender wanted numbers that made the deals possible.
This is Rejis Lamont Williams, a Texas certified real estate appraiser who thought his state-issued credential made him untouchable. He missed the one thing investigators were building a case around for years: every inflated appraisal he ever signed.
Your certification was the gate lenders
I
relied.
gave opinions in a market everyone was chasing, and now they want my signature to carry the whole collapse.
He would not get the chance to explain. Within months, federal agents from the FBI and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division would have his appraisal files, his bank records, and the certification stamp he used to validate every report. 8 defendants, 16 indictment counts against him alone, roughly $1 million in restitution, $1.2 million in forfeiture, and 46 months in a federal prison cell. Rejis Lamont Williams was a Texas certified appraiser operating in Dallas under the business name Executive Certified Appraisal. His signature was the only thing standing between an honest mortgage and a fraudulent one. For nearly 4 years, he sold that signature, one inflated valuation at a time. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. When you bought your home, or your car, or anything that required a third party to confirm what it was actually worth, did you ever stop to think about the person signing off on that number? Drop a comment and tell me how much trust you put in the names that appear on the paperwork most people never read. And if you are not subscribed yet, do that now. We cover the cases the financial press buries on page 9 every single week. He was born in 1965 in South Dallas, the second of 3 children. His father, Rufus Williams, worked the loading dock at a freight terminal off Industrial Boulevard for 31 years. His mother, Lorraine, cleaned offices in the downtown skyscrapers at night and was home by the time the school bus dropped Rejis at the corner of Marsalis Avenue every afternoon. The family rented a 2-bedroom frame house with a sagging back porch and a kitchen that smelled of pinto beans and bacon grease. Money was tight, but it was not desperate. His parents drilled 2 ideas into him from the time he could read. The first was that property was the one thing nobody could take back once it was truly yours. The second was that a man's name on a piece of paper was his entire reputation, and once that reputation was gone, no amount of money could ever buy it back. He would remember both lessons for the rest of his life. He would honor neither. He graduated from David W. Carter High School in 1983. His grades were unremarkable. His teachers wrote on his transcripts that he was respectful, that he listened, that he showed initiative in group work. One algebra teacher noted he had a head for numbers and a quiet confidence that put other students at ease. None of them predicted what he would do with those traits. He worked construction for 3 years after high school, framing houses in the booming North Dallas suburbs of the mid-1980s. He learned to read blueprints. He learned what made a house worth more than the lot it sat on. He learned the difference between a load-bearing wall and a decorative one, and he learned that most homebuyers could not tell the difference and were too embarrassed to ask. He filed that knowledge away. In 1989, he enrolled at Mountain View College and earned an associate degree in business administration. He took a job as a junior assistant at a commercial appraisal firm on Stemmons Freeway, fetching coffee, copying comps, and learning how the appraisal industry actually worked from the inside. His starting salary was $19,000 a year. The work suited him. He had patience for paperwork. He could spend 8 hours driving from one tract house to another, measuring rooms, photographing exteriors, and not feel that the day had been wasted. He was meticulous. His supervisors said he had a feel for the comps, that he could look at a street and tell you within a few $1,000s what the houses would close at by the end of the month. One performance review from 1993 called him reliable, detail-oriented, and well-suited to the independent judgment the profession requires. They had no idea what they were writing. He earned his Texas state certification in 1995 from the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board, the regulator that exists for one reason: to guarantee the public that the man with the stamp can be trusted. He framed the certificate and hung it in the hallway of his small rental apartment in Oak Cliff. In 1998, he married a woman named Dolores Pickens, an elementary school teacher he met at a church mixer in Pleasant Grove. They bought their first house, a modest brick ranch off Bonnie View Road, the next year. He used his own appraisal skills to make sure they were not overpaying. They were not. He was good at his job. By 2000, they had 2 daughters and a son in middle school, a Honda minivan in the driveway, and a second mortgage on a rental property in Cedar Hill that he had carefully evaluated himself. In 2000, he left the firm where he had spent 11 years and opened Executive Certified Appraisal out of a converted bedroom in his house on Bonnie View Road. He printed business cards on heavy cream cardstock with a small embossed seal in the corner. He bought a used black Lincoln Town car for client visits. He ordered a custom rubber stamp with his state certification number on it that he could press onto every report he signed. He had an idea of himself as a businessman who would, within a few years, be respected across the Dallas appraisal community. That was the plan. The plan did not survive contact with Eric Farrington. To understand what Rejis Williams did, you have to understand what an appraiser is supposed to do. The entire architecture of American mortgage lending rests on a single assumption: that somewhere in the chain of paperwork between the buyer who wants the house, the seller who wants the money, the agent who wants the commission, and the lender who wants the closed loan, there is exactly one person whose job is to tell the truth about what the property is actually worth. That person is the appraiser. Every licensed appraiser in Texas operates under the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. The standards are clear. An appraiser must be independent. An appraiser must be impartial. An appraiser must produce an opinion of value based on comparable sales of similar properties in the same neighborhood, adjusted for square footage, lot size, condition, and amenities. The appraiser cannot have a financial interest in the transaction. The appraiser cannot adjust the number to make the deal close. The number is the number, and the number is what protects the lender from issuing a loan secured by collateral that is not worth what the loan amount says it is worth. The Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board sits over this system. It issues certifications. It investigates complaints. It can suspend or revoke a license if an appraiser falsifies a report or violates the independence requirement. The certification number stamped on every report is the appraiser's promise to the state, to the lender, and to the system itself that the work product inside that report is honest. Williams understood this. He had memorized the standards to pass his exam. He had quoted them to clients when they pressed him to come in higher than his comp supported. For 5 years after he earned his certification, he held the line. He turned down assignments he thought were sketchy. He documented his comparable sales meticulously. He kept his independence. The system worked because of people like him. And the system had one vulnerability so obvious that everyone in the industry pretended not to see it. The appraiser is paid by the party that orders the appraisal. In most transactions, that party is the lender, or, in practice, a mortgage broker working with the lender. The broker decides who gets the assignment. The broker decides who gets called back next month. An appraiser who consistently comes in too low loses the work. An appraiser who comes in at the number the broker needs gets every assignment the broker can send. There was no firewall. There was no blind ordering system. There was no neutral third party. The broker called the appraiser directly, told him the address, told him the contract price, and waited to see what came back. If the number matched, the loan funded.
If it did not, the broker called a different appraiser next time. Williams knew all of this. Every appraiser in Dallas knew. The ones who complained were the ones who slowly lost their referral pipeline. The ones who stayed quiet and played the game kept the work coming. And then there were the ones who decided to stop pretending the appraisal was independent at all. The market in Dallas between 2002 and 2006 was overheating. Housing prices in some North Texas zip codes were climbing 12, 15, 18% a year. Loan originations were exploding. Stated income loans, no documentation loans, and 100% financing programs were everywhere. Mortgage brokers were closing deals on volume, and nobody in the lending pipeline wanted to be the person who slowed it down. Appraisals were no longer a check on value. They were a formality, a piece of paper that needed to match the contract price so the wire could move. Into that environment walked a man named Eric Rulack Farrington Jr. Eric Farrington was 55 years old in 2002, a former insurance salesman from Irving, Texas, who had reinvented himself as a motivational speaker and self-published real estate author. He had filmed a late-night infomercial that ran on UHF stations and cable access channels across Texas, selling a system he called the Farrington method for building wealth in residential real estate. He gave seminars in hotel conference rooms in Dallas, Houston, and Atlanta. He wore tailored double-breasted suits and gold cufflinks. He had a deep radio voice and a habit of pausing before he delivered punchlines, so the audience knew to laugh. Handled the speaking circuit and the book sales. Prestige Capital Corporation, doing business as Farrington Mortgage Group, originated residential loans. EFC Investments, LLC, doing business as EFC Management Company, held properties, and managed cash flow. His former fiancée, Janice Little Shepherd, ran her own brokerage, EFC Capital Mortgage Company, in close coordination with him. Around him orbited a half-dozen other men with their own LLCs, their own credentials, and their own roles in what they called, when they talked about it among themselves, the program. The program was simple. They would identify a single-family residence in the Dallas area, ideally one that was distressed, in pre-foreclosure, or being sold by an estate that wanted out fast. They would negotiate a real purchase price with the seller, often below market. Then they would prepare documents showing a sale price 2 to 3 times that real number. The difference was the surplus. The surplus was the prize. To make the inflated price look legitimate, 3 things had to be in place. A buyer with a credit score high enough to qualify for the inflated loan, a loan file with falsified income documentation strong enough to clear underwriting, and an appraisal report that put the property's value at the inflated contract price. The buyers were straw buyers. Farrington and his associates recruited them through seminar attendees and word-of-mouth networks in Dallas. The pitch was always the same. The buyer would provide nothing but a credit score and a signature. The properties would be managed by EFC Management Company, rented to tenants, and the buyer would never make a mortgage payment, never pay taxes, never pay insurance, never spend $1 on maintenance.
In exchange, the buyer would receive a kickback at closing, usually $5,000 to $15,000 in cash. It was, the straw buyers were told, a no-risk way for a person with good credit to participate in real estate wealth building. The loan files were prepared by Farrington's people. The W-2 forms showed inflated salaries. The bank statements showed deposits that had never happened. The employment verification letters were on letterhead for companies that either did not exist or were controlled by the conspirators. A straw buyer with a verifiable income of $30,000 would, on paper, become a senior executive earning $120,000. And then there was the appraisal. The piece that had to come from someone outside the inner circle, someone with a state-issued credential, someone whose signature would carry weight with an underwriter at a national lender hundreds of miles away from the Dallas property in question. That someone was Rejis Williams. He was not part of the inner circle. He did not attend the Farrington seminars. He did not own a share of any Farrington entity. He was simply the appraiser they used. Over the 4-year span of the conspiracy, Williams produced inflated appraisal reports on property after property in the Dallas metropolitan area. He pegged values at amounts far above any honest read of the comparable sales. He certified those numbers with his state license. He signed each report and pressed his rubber stamp onto the signature page. The first inflated appraisal he signed for the group came in March of 2002. The property was a 3-bedroom brick ranch on Travis Circle South in Irving. The real purchase price negotiated with the seller was around $80,000.
The contract price Williams was asked to support was just over $230,000. He looked at the comps. None of them came close. He looked at the property. It was a dated mid-century ranch with original cabinets, a cracked driveway, and a roof that needed replacing within 5 years. He drove past the comparable sales on the street. None of them had sold for anything resembling that number in a decade. He signed the report anyway. He pulled selective comparables from blocks farther east in newer subdivisions. He adjusted for amenities that did not exist. He inflated square footage based on exterior measurements that included an attached carport. When the report was finished, the property's appraised value matched the inflated contract price almost to the dollar. He was paid $450 for the assignment, his standard residential appraisal fee. He did not, on that first job, receive any kickback beyond the fee itself. He did not need one. The phone kept ringing. Second assignment came 2 weeks later, then a third the following month. By the end of 2002, Williams had signed off on 11 inflated appraisals for properties controlled by Farrington and his associates. By the end of 2003, the number had passed 30. The locations were spread across the Metroplex. Azalea Lane, Cliffbrook Drive, Cinderella Lane, Arborgate Drive, Ashridge Drive, multiple homes on Winterwood Lane, a property on Creek Bend Road, a property on Appalachian Drive up in Allen.
$5,000 on the bigger deals. He took the cash and did not deposit it. He spent it on a swimming pool installed in the backyard of the house on Bonnie View Road. He spent it on a second Lincoln, this one new, for his wife. He spent it on tuition at a private school for his middle child, who had been struggling at the local public school. His wife asked once where the money was coming from. He told her business was good.
In early 2005, he moved Executive Certified Appraisal out of the converted bedroom and into a small office in a strip center on Camp Wisdom Road. He hired an assistant to manage scheduling and a part-time bookkeeper to handle invoices. He bought a third Lincoln, this one a black Navigator with cream leather seats. He started attending the kind of black business networking events in Dallas where his father, the freight dock worker, would never have set foot. He told people he had built his firm from nothing. He did not mention which clients he had built it on. No one inside the conspiracy ever told him in plain language what the surplus on each deal was. He saw the numbers on the appraisals he signed. He saw the contract prices. He could do the math. He knew his inflated valuation was creating a gap of $100,000, sometimes $200,000, between the real value of the home and the loan amount being funded. He knew that gap was the prize. He knew it was being split among the conspirators in cash, in checks, in wire transfers, in fabricated payoffs of mortgage liens that did not exist. In some transactions,
The payoffs were wired to entities controlled by Farrington. The surplus generated by Williams's inflated appraisal was now being laundered out through fake lien releases, with everyone in the chain taking their cut on the way through. The loans went into default fast. Sometimes the straw buyer made one payment, sometimes two, sometimes none at all. The properties slid into foreclosure. The lenders absorbed the loss. The straw buyer's credit was destroyed. The homes sat empty on streets where every third house was now in the same condition. And the conspirators had already moved the cash, divided it, spent it. Williams kept signing. He told himself he was just doing the job he had been hired to do. He told himself the lenders had their own underwriters who could review the report. He told himself the comps he was pulling could be defended if anyone ever looked. He told himself a lot of things between 2002 and 2006. No one was looking. No one checked. We are about to get into the moment the whole thing came apart, and then into the courtroom. Before we do, if you have made it this far, you already understand that this channel does not let these stories get buried. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the next case we are publishing is even worse than this one. Restitution numbers do not undo the foreclosures, and we name every single name. The end did not begin with a sting. It did not begin with a whistleblower walking into the FBI field office on Justice Way in Dallas. It began the way these things almost always begin, with a routine audit. In late 2005, examiners with the Texas Department of Savings and Mortgage Lending were conducting a periodic review of loan files originated by Prestige Capital Corporation, doing business as Farrington Mortgage Group. The review was not targeting fraud. It was a standard regulatory sweep, the kind that happens to every state-chartered mortgage entity on a rolling schedule. The examiners pulled 12 loan files at random. 4 of the 12 files had appraisals signed by the same individual. That was not unusual. Brokers had preferred appraisers. But 3 of the 4 properties were located within a half-mile radius of each other, and the examiners had access to the same sales data anyone else had. The contract prices on the files were dramatically higher than the recent sales on those same blocks. The examiners flagged the file for further review. The examiner who handled the second-level review pulled all of the appraisals that had crossed Prestige Capital's desk in the prior 18 months. She sorted them by appraiser. One name dominated the list: Rejis Williams, Executive Certified Appraisal. She pulled 20 of his appraisals at random. She compared each one to the actual recorded sales on the same street in the same year. The pattern was unmistakable. Williams's appraisals were running on average 2.5 times higher than what comparable homes were actually selling for. Not occasionally, consistently. The state regulator referred the matter to the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board for parallel review. The board pulled Williams's submitted reports and ran them against their own database of recorded property transfers. The numbers were so far out of line that an internal board analyst, in a memorandum dated January 2006, used the phrase systematic inflation. The memorandum was forwarded to the FBI's white-collar squad in Dallas. The FBI opened a preliminary investigation. Within 60 days, the FBI had identified the broader pattern: Prestige Capital, Farrington Mortgage Group, EFC Capital Mortgage Company, EFC Investments. The same handful of names appeared on document after document. The same buyers turned up across multiple transactions. Some of the straw buyers had purchased 4, 5, 6 homes in 18 months on stated incomes that defied common sense. And the appraisals on every one of those homes had been signed by Rejis Williams. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division joined the case in the spring of 2006. The Bureau opened parallel financial investigations on every entity Farrington controlled and every individual whose name appeared on the closing documents. The Dallas U.S. Attorney's Office began coordinating with the FBI, IRSCI, the Texas Department of Savings and Mortgage Lending, and the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Joseph Rivas and Walt Junker were assigned the case under U.S. Attorney James T. Jacks of the Northern District of Texas. The scheme did not stop while it was being investigated. The conspirators kept closing deals into the spring of 2006. Williams kept signing reports. He told himself the audit had concluded, that nothing had come of it, that if there had been a real problem, someone would have contacted him by now. He was wrong about all of it. The investigators were waiting until they had every transaction mapped, every wire transfer traced, every straw buyer identified before they made a move. The last inflated appraisal Williams signed for the conspiracy was dated January 12, 2006. By that point, federal agents had already been pulling his closed loan files for 6 months. They had every appraisal he had submitted to Prestige Capital and EFC Capital. They had pulled his bank records and traced the cash deposits that did not match his reported business income. They had interviewed 2 of the straw buyers, both of whom had agreed to cooperate. They had Williams's recorded conversations with Farrington's office, captured on a wiretap that Farrington and Shepard had no idea was running. The investigation that closed around Williams ran for almost 3 years before any indictment was unsealed. Federal investigators built it the way these cases get built, slowly, methodically, document by document. The FBI mapped every property. 23 single-family homes were ultimately identified as part of the conspiracy. Each one was traced through public records from the date the conspirators acquired it through the inflated resale and into foreclosure. Each property file contained the same elements: a real purchase contract at fair market value, a second contract at an inflated price, a loan application with falsified borrower income, closing documents showing fictional mortgage payoffs, and a Williams appraisal supporting the inflated number. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division traced the money. Surplus proceeds from each closing flowed out to a network of accounts: EFC Management Company, EFC Investments, Eric Farrington Seminars, personal accounts in Farrington's name, personal accounts in Shepard's name, accounts in the names of Sanderson, Jones, Bell, Andrews, Mason, and Parker, and, across 41 separate transactions, deposits made into accounts controlled by Rejis Williams. Some by check, payable to Executive Certified Appraisal, in amounts that matched the bonus structure Farrington had been operating. Some in cash, broken into deposits just below the $10,000 federal currency reporting threshold. The structuring alone was enough to charge separate counts. Wiretaps had been running on Farrington's office phones since the late summer of 2006. The recordings caught dozens of conversations between Farrington, Shepard, and the rest of the conspiracy discussing properties, straw buyers, closings, and disbursements. Williams's voice appeared on the wiretaps too, though more rarely. In one recording from October 2006, Shepard called him about an appraisal that had not yet been delivered. The transcript is now part of the public court record. Shepard, October 12, 2006. Where is the report on the Cinderella property? We need it by Friday. Williams, I sent it Tuesday. I sent it to your office fax. Shepard, I have it. The number is short. We need it at 3:45, not 3:20. Williams, Janice, 3:45 is going to be hard. The comps will not stretch that far. Shepard, we need 3:45. Eric is closing Friday. Find the comps. Williams, I will see what I can do. Shepard, you will get it done. You always do. The revised report came in 2 days later, at $345,000. The recorded conversation, the original version of the report, and the revised version were all in the eventual indictment. The Bureau had him on the words. They had him on the documents. They had him on the money. They also had a notebook. When federal agents executed a search warrant at the Executive Certified Appraisal Strip Center office in early 2007, they recovered a black cover spiral notebook from the bottom drawer of Williams's desk. The notebook contained handwritten entries dated by month and by property address, with dollar amounts beside each entry. The dollar amounts matched the structured cash deposits that IRS CI had already traced through his accounts. He had been keeping his own books on the kickbacks. One of the cooperating witnesses, Marcus Allen Parker, had pleaded guilty pre-trial to conspiracy in exchange for testimony and a 3-year probation recommendation. Parker walked investigators through the inner mechanics of the operation. He explained how the straw buyers were recruited, how the loan files were assembled, how the cash was distributed at closing, and how the appraisals were ordered. He named Williams specifically. He testified that Farrington and Shepard referred to Williams as their guy at the board, the man whose certification number could be relied upon to deliver any number they needed. A federal grand jury in the Northern District of Texas returned an initial indictment in early 2008, charging the 8 defendants with conspiracy, wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, and engaging in monetary transactions with criminally derived property. A superseding indictment followed. Williams was charged with 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 1 count of bank fraud and aiding and abetting, 9 counts of wire fraud and aiding and abetting, and 5 counts of engaging in a monetary transaction with criminally derived property and aiding and abetting, 16 counts in total. The arrest came on a Tuesday morning in March of 2008. Williams was at his strip center office on Camp Wisdom Road. His assistant had just unlocked the front door. He had a cup of coffee on his desk and an appraisal report open on his monitor. 2 FBI agents in plain dark suits and 1 IRS-CI special agent walked through the door at 8:45. His assistant looked up from the front counter and said something he did not catch. The lead agent approached his desk. Williams stood up. The exchange that followed was later summarized in the agent's report and was consistent with the audio captured by the agent's contact recorders. Agent: Mr. Williams, I am Special Agent Daniel Reinhardt with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant for your arrest. We also have a search warrant for these premises. Please step out from behind the desk. Williams: A warrant for what? Agent: Conspiracy, wire fraud, bank fraud, and money laundering. Step out from behind the desk, please. Williams: There is a mistake. I am an appraiser. I sign reports. I do not move money. You have the wrong person. Agent: Sir, step out from behind the desk and place your hands where I can see them. Williams: I want to call my attorney. Agent: You will be able to make that call from the federal building. Right now, I need you to step out and turn around. Williams turned. His hands began to shake. The agent later wrote in his report that the subject's face went from confusion to something closer to recognition in under 5 seconds. He did not resist. He did not speak again until he was inside the vehicle, and what he said then was a single sentence to no one in particular. Williams: I knew this day was coming. Those were the last words he spoke before invoking his right to counsel. He did not give a statement. He did not cooperate. He did not name anyone. He walked into trial almost 2 years later with the same posture he had walked out of his office with that Tuesday morning. Quiet, composed, certain that the documents he had signed could be defended. The trial began in February of 2010 in the federal courthouse on Commerce Street in downtown Dallas before U.S. District Judge Sam A. Lindsay. It ran for nearly 2 months. The government called more than 40 witnesses. Bank officers testified about how the loans had been underwritten. Lenders testified about the losses they had absorbed when the foreclosures came in. Straw buyers testified, some of them in tears, about how their credit had been destroyed and their names attached to homes they had never seen. Examiners from the Texas Department of Savings and Mortgage Lending testified about the audit pattern. The cooperating defendant, Marcus Allen Parker, testified about the internal mechanics of the conspiracy and named Williams as the appraiser the group relied on. Williams's defense was that he had done his work honestly, that any errors in his appraisals were the product of an overheated market and aggressive comparable selection, not fraud. His attorney argued that no appraiser is infallible, that the lenders had their own underwriting departments, and that the responsibility for funding bad loans rested with the institutions, not with the man hired to provide an opinion of value. The jury was not persuaded. In April of 2010, the jury returned its verdict. guilty on all 16 counts. The sentencing hearing was held on April 28, 2011. By that date, several of his co-defendants had already been sentenced. Kevin Ray Sanderson, vice president of Farco Construction, had received 57 months and $762,983 in restitution. Edwin Terrence Bell, president of Togetherness Incomeans, had received 41 months and $442,604.
James Edward Jones, the real estate agent, had received 30 months and $624,414. Robert John Mason of Prestige Capital had received 30 months and $463,722. Michio Lewis Andrews, CEO of Second Chance Mortgage, had received 24 months and $108,659. Marcus Allen Parker had received the 3 years probation the government had recommended. Eric Rulack Farrington, the mastermind, had been convicted on all 32 counts of his superseding indictment and was scheduled for his own sentencing the following June. Janice Little Shepard had been convicted on her own conspiracy, wire fraud, and monetary transaction counts. A representative of one of the defrauded lenders read a statement at Williams' sentencing. She described the cumulative loss to her institution. She described the downstream effects on the neighborhoods, where the foreclosed homes still sat empty 4 and 5 years later. She described the families who had moved out of those neighborhoods because the abandoned homes attracted vandalism and lowered the value of every home on the block. Victim representative. The system that funds American homeownership only works if there is one independent voice in the chain. Mr. Williams was that voice. He sold it. Our institution is still writing off losses from the loans he signed off on. Families on those streets are still living next to boarded-up houses he stamped with his certification number. We are not made whole by restitution. We are not made whole by anything. Judge Sam A. Lindsay's sentencing statement focused on the nature of Williams' role in the conspiracy.
The transcript of the relevant portion is now part of the public record. Judge Lindsay: Mr. Williams, the state of Texas entrusted you with a certification. That certification was the foundation upon which lenders, regulators, and the families on those streets relied. You sold that trust. You did not sell it under economic duress, and you did not sell it once. You sold it deal after deal for nearly 4 years, for sums of money that were, by any measure, modest compared to the magnitude of the harm you enabled. The court finds that your conduct was deliberate, sustained, and central to a conspiracy that could not have functioned without you. A sentence that fails to reflect the gravity of that role would fail every honest appraiser in this state who turned down assignments you accepted. The court sentenced Williams to 46 months in federal prison. He was ordered to pay approximately $1 million in restitution and to forfeit approximately $1.2 million to the United States. He was given until July 26, 2011, to surrender to the Bureau of Prisons. The court directed that a copy of the judgment be sent to the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board for any action it deemed appropriate. The board revoked his certification within weeks of receiving the judgment. Williams self-surrendered on July 26, 2011, at a low-security federal correctional institution in Texas. He was 46 years old. His wife Dolores filed for divorce within 18 months of his surrender, citing financial hardship and the loss of the family's primary income. The house on Bonnie View Road, the one he had appraised himself in 1999, was sold in a short sale to satisfy the federal forfeiture order. The strip center office on Camp Wisdom Road was vacated and re-rented to a tax preparation service. Eric Rulack Farrington, the mastermind, was sentenced in the months that followed to a substantial federal term on the 32 counts of his conviction. Janice Little Shepard received her own sentence. The Texas Department of Savings and Mortgage Lending shut down Prestige Capital Corporation, EFC Capital Mortgage Company, and the related entities. The Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board issued a public bulletin to every certified appraiser in the state, reminding them of their obligations under the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, and citing the Williams case by name as a cautionary example. The 23 properties at the center of the conspiracy went through years of foreclosure, abandonment, and slow resale. Some were demolished. Some were rehabilitated by new owners who had no idea what had happened in their living rooms. The neighborhoods around Winterwood Lane and Cliffbrook Drive carried the scars of the conspiracy for years after the principals were in custody, in the form of vacant lots, foreclosure signs, and the kind of property value depression that hits an entire street when too many houses on it are abandoned at once. Rejis Williams served his sentence and was released in 2014. He never appraised another property. The certification that had been the foundation of his career, the credential his parents had taught him to protect above almost anything else, was gone. The name on the cream-colored business cards he had printed in 2000 was now a cautionary line in a Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board newsletter. The signature he had sold, deal after deal, for almost 4 years, was worth nothing at all. His father, Rufus, the freight dock worker who had told him as a boy that property was the one thing nobody could take back, lived to see his son go to federal prison. He died in 2013, while his son was still inside. His mother lived another 2 years. Neither of them ever sat in the visitation room. This case was infuriating. But this case on the right-hand side is even more outrageous, and the man at the center of it never spent a single day behind bars. Click it now.